Hi, I'm Malika Bilal in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today is freedom of expression online under threat in Malaysia. We'll talk about government plans to regulate the internet. Our digital producer and my co-host Omar Badar is here looking out for your live feedback, standing right next to me to do it. And what are you seeing so far?
You know, whenever we do a show on Malaysia, we're always just reminded of how active they are on social media because we're getting a ton of it from there.
Love that.
And of course, a lot of it is coming in opposition to the proposed government regulation. We have LZ over here, for example, who says that the proposed regulation is a sign of just how ultra-paranoid the government has become just to stay in power. Now, for folks at home, you can join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream.
I'm Brent Willett. I'm an economic developer from Iowa, and I'm in the stream.
Well, as Omar just told us, Malaysians are pretty active online, especially when it comes to online news portals and social media. Sites like Malaysia Kini and the Malaysian Insider are widely read. And according to a study from last year, 62% of internet users in the country access social media sites on a daily basis. That's opposed to a global average of just 42%. It's no surprise then that many are concerned by Prime Minister Najib Razak's recent announcement that he plans to regulate the internet in the face of insults and untruths. His government argues that such misinformation could destroy social harmony in a multiracial nation. Malaysians have protested issues of freedom of expression in the past. You can see them there. But the internet is one space the ruling party has long maintained it would never censor. Some critics say the government's recent comments are a reaction to an ongoing corruption scandal surrounding the One Malaysia Development Berhad, a government investment fund known as 1MDB. Investigators claim that $700 million was allegedly diverted to Najib's personal bank accounts from the fund. And much of the conversation around that controversy has taken place online, as the stream recently covered. So is this an alarming moment for civil liberties in Malaysia, or is government regulation necessary to maintain social cohesion and prevent defamation? To help us answer those questions, we're joined by Jack S.M. Key from the Center for Independent Journalism in Kuala Lumpur, Jahaber Siddiq, the CEO and editor of the online portal The Malaysian Insider, and Syed Razak Al-Sagaf, the Deputy Speaker for Gerakan, a member of the ruling Barisan Nasional coalition. We also reached out to several members of the ruling party and the Prime Minister's cabinet to join our show, and they declined. So Jahaber, I'll start with you. Do the Prime Minister's recent comments mark a turning point for online freedom of expression?
Well, not quite. You know, he's been increasingly extending his reach to online media. I think this is another step. He's stung by comments on online media, not just by journalists, but also by the public outlet at large, who use Twitter, Facebook updates, and even Instagrams to poke fun at him. So I think it's just a logical step by him. You know, he's just repeating what our former Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, did in '87, which is control the print media at the time and restrict the publication of at least 3 newspapers in '87 for 4 months. So it's not new at all. It's just a logical step for him.
We know that there have been some protests last night. We have Norman here who tweeted in saying the Malaysian government is desperate to clamp down on voices of dissent. 16 students were arrested last night. Says it was the Occupy Parliament movement by the students demanded that the Prime Minister Najib to resign, prompting police arrests under Section 124B, that's the Sedition Act. Of course, the Malaysian Insider reported that this is what the police were threatening the protesters with, but we're not really sure what the charges officially were. Syed, if protests like this continue, what implications do you think it would have on the proposed regulation?
Well, in my opinion, when the Prime Minister Najib stressed that the internet is in high time to be slightly regulated, of course it has to go through a process of the Attorney General's chambers together with the legal draftsmen at Parliament to go, and they have to fight it out with the lawmakers between the opposition as well as pro-Barisan Nasional lawmakers in Parliament. And when they enact laws, they have to go for a first reading and a second reading throughout a lot of debate. Because in Malaysia, the ruling party does not control 2/3 majority anymore. Of course, it has a slight simple majority. But what I'm trying to say is that when people of a country with so many diverse religions and population and races. In Peninsular Malaysia, we have the Malays, the Chinese, the Indians, the Eurasians, the Siamese community, and also the Sikh community as well. And in East Malaysia, in Sabah and Sarawak, we have about 20, 30 ethnic communities. Therefore, whatever which is suitable in a homogeneous society may not be suitable in a country like Malaysia, because race relations in Malaysia, whether you like it or not, has to be managed well, because we don't want something like the LA riots to happen or something like the Jefferson issue in America, because one type of democracy is not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. But of course, I expect there will be robust arguments and dissent from the opposition party. I, for one, from Parti Gerakan, believes that in freedom of speech up to a certain extent. In the past, it has always been, we expect people to self-regulate themselves. But in the past 8 years or so, when the opposition parties have managed to strengthen their foothold in Malaysia, they have been, in my opinion, my frank assessment, they have been playing on divisive racial politics, playing up on hatred among the various races, and it can tear.
Can I just jump in maybe?
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I think that the idea that the proposed amendments is going to go through a robust debate, and they will be allowed the opportunity for debate and dissenting opinions, and therefore be going through an expected democratic process is perhaps a little bit optimistic, considering what happened in terms of the passing of the Sedition Act in the last parliamentary sitting, which went through overnight, 14 hours of debate, and then it just went through, even though it really increased the powers of the Sedition Act immensely, and it has huge implications on civil and political rights. So I think that, number one, is maybe not quite so accurate lah. Secondly,
and Jack, actually, before you get to your second point, I just want to note for our audience that the Sedition Act is something that we have covered here on the stream previously, and it covered racial or insensitive language, what could be deemed insensitive language to the racial harmony of Malaysia. And so, of course, was very controversial at the time and still is. But go ahead to your second point.
Yes, extremely, because it also widened the powers and made compulsory minimum jail punishment even for first-time offenders, and the law is very, very broad. So I think there needs to be some clarity by the legislators in terms of actually what are the specific standards and international norms that the Malaysian government has actually signed on to draft any laws that restrict freedom of expression. That's one, but I can go to that later. Yep. The second point I wanted to make is that in order to actually create a society where diversity can flourish is to allow people the space and the freedom to be able to have dissenting opinions and speak freely without fear of being threatened or being clamped down or being monitored and surveilled. That's so to say that the way...
to interrupt, Jack. I totally agree that you need to give space to people, Jack, but not to the point of spewing out malicious lies, outright fabrication, and to incite racial hatred and also religious discord among the various communities in Malaysia. I can give you clear examples. You know, they had some demonstrations in front of Sogo, which is a famous shopping complex in Kuala Lumpur, and you have a picture abusing the picture of our poor, he's quite old, he's quite elderly, our present king of Malaysia. And you have instances on Instagram and on Facebook where they have cases of people who are smashed in an accident and they superimpose the face of the king of Malaysia. If you are in Thailand, you would get, easily under the majesty laws,
But Syed,
there
Thailand,
are exceptions.
Right?
I agree that you have the right to say things, but not to the point of spewing out malicious lies.
Sayed, we have somebody who's challenging that view online. Sayed, we have somebody who challenges that view. We have Yvonne here who says Malaysia has sufficient laws, both in civil and criminal, to deal with insults and untruths. There is no need for additional regulations. How do you respond to that? Why is this particular, this stuff could be dealt with through the courts. Why do you need to add internet regulation on top of that?
Because you need, when somebody now, when you say that he's saying something wrong in his Facebook, he claims that his Facebook has been hacked. Whereas if you have sufficient regulation to do forensic, investigation into his internet IP address, then you can see whether he really has done it himself or he claims that somebody hacked into it. Because to me,
But-
the right to say things is all right, but not to say malicious things or libelous things which will affect the discord and harmony of this country. Because
Right, and
in
Jack,
principle,
I see you
let's look at
shaking your
the
head.
right
Jahaber is
right?
jumping in here. I want to jump in for a second, though, because I do want to pick up on the point that Said was making. This is another incident at a mall, but it elucidates some of what Said was saying. And so I want you all to have a look at this. This happened not too long ago. This was in July. There was a fight that then was talked about on social media. So take a look at what that incident looked like. So following that, the Prime Minister actually did speak out. I'm going to play you a little clip of what he said at a press conference about falling prey to false rumors regarding this incident. And this is just one example of what he was talking about. So have a look at what he said. We subtitled it for you.
Ada gambar-gambar yang telah pun dimuatkan dalam media sosial yang tak ada kaitan sama sekali dengan kejadian tersebut. Oleh itu, saya ingin menyarankan supaya tidak semudahnya kita terima apa jua yang tersebar melalui media sosial. Sebaik-baiknya.
So Jahaber, he says, don't fall prey to these false rumors. And other officials said that these were leading to disharmony. This could disrupt that social fabric that Malaysia is predicated on. What do you have to say to that?
I think he's overplaying this impact of social media on the general public in Malaysia. There are 30 million of us in Malaysia. Internet penetration is pretty high at 70%, but not a lot of people are actually on social media. There are 15 million Facebook accounts, about 4 million Twitter accounts, but most of them are robots, as proven in a few incidents before, that most accounts are fake accounts set up by mainly either pro-opposition or pro-government rulers. So I think it's overplayed that whatever happens on social media affects the fabric of Malaysia. I think it just overstates the case. What affects the fabric of Malaysia is the government, the leadership, the policies, whether they are fair to everyone, not just social media. Social media is just the medium. It's not exactly the message, is it?
Jack?
I think that this, I tend to agree with Jahaber to some extent. I think that the power of social media in order to sway opinions has certainly been overplayed and politicized, and this has been seen as the primary kind of evil towards national harmony and social cohesion. I think the incident that you also played is very complicated, and it's a bubble of a lot of complex factors at play. But I do want to go back to what the Prime Minister Najib did say. He did say, do not easily believe in rumors and things that you see being passed online. And I think that is actually the most sound advice that you can give. This is actually what is necessary and important in order to address there is an issue of maybe false rumors, but the way to manage it and to respond to it is not through greater regulation of laws, because as Yvonne said, an earlier Twitter user, there are plenty of laws and I can cite them off to you one by one. There's more than enough. What is actually really, really necessary and important is some sort of media literacy and education initiatives that needs to happen amongst internet users as more and more of us get online. And I think that is the bit that is actually deprioritized and not looked at seriously enough as an important measure to take.
Yep. So we have some people who are raising concerns about what this could ultimately lead to. We have Richard Lowe here who says the current measures won't work, but if they are persistent, desperate to hold on to power, they will use a harsher approach by banning social media completely, apply the Sedition Act and arrests. And just on that last point about banning social media, Chow Pong says the only effective way to regulate the internet is to ban it outright. This is, of course, impossible economically and socially. Say it to the people who say that the only way you're going to stop people from spreading rumors is to just keep them from getting online entirely. Is there any fear at all that we might see that level of a clampdown on the internet at all?
I doubt
Obviously
it.
not. Obviously not. In my opinion,
when
we refer back to
Jahaber and Sayed are both saying obviously not. So let's hear from Sayed first, and then Jahaber, you jump in.
Yeah. Okay. So when we refer to the Lawyat incident, the shop that was robbed belonged to a member of my party. but he's the owner. When somebody stole the phone, it was a clear-cut case of thievery, very shameful in the month of Ramadan to steal. But when both of them were arrested, the accomplice who was not caught with the phone said that he's not liable for it. He was released, and he went up and cooked up a story saying that he had a receipt saying that he bought the phone, but the phone was an imitation or non-genuine phone, you know, from not direct. It was, what do you call it? It's a real phone, branded, but it is not from the direct seller. It's a parallel importing. So they went and attacked the ground floor shop of Oppo because these were the personnel that helped to catch the boy.
So Said, you're describing for us that what earlier was termed a complicated situation, what happened in the mall. And I understand that and appreciate that. But what happened afterwards was that people took to the web to discuss this. And that's what the Prime Minister was talking about. And that's what we really want to focus on here.
It almost became a racial issue when it was a plain case of thievery. But it became an almost thing about the Malays being cheated by the traders in Lawyat, and that they almost created something which could have gone out of control. And as you can see, some of the pictures showed even the police personnel who were there were unable to control the situation because it is like a whole mob running amok. So the danger, if you spew things which is not verified, and then you replicate it because everyone is on social media, it can easily lead to something which can get out of hand, and we don't want that to happen in Malaysia. But I totally agree. Regulations by self-regulating would have been the best. But we have seen in the last few years, it is not possible. Therefore, the government has to step in. But
I'm not sure how you say that.
Yeah.
Jack?
But from my party,
I'm not sure how you can assert that doesn't work. It
self-regulation does not work because we don't have enough discipline, because there are too many people on the net.
So are you
and
saying
there are
that
people
if there
who
are
spewing out hatred for the sake of removing the party from power?
That does not make sense at all, because you really need, don't you agree that the internet is a very important platform for democratic participation of the people,
yes,
right?
But it
This
must
is
not
also
be
why the
abused.
government invests so much in it. But what do you constitute
Yes, it mustn't
as
be abused.
Having open
when you say
conversation and discourse
to differ.
is not
when you
an
ask
abuse.
to regulate,
And
it's okay if you can
when there
regulate
are
yourself, but it's been proven that things are getting out of hand.
Said, there's many ways of regulation, yeah? There's self-regulation, there's media peer regulation. I'm sure Jahaba can also speak to this. I think this is a very, short-sighted and heavy-handed way to say that the only way to regulate any kind of potentially problematic speech is to bring in the rule of law, and a very heavy-handed rule of law. And we know that there are many types of legislation that is already in place that is quite broad, that does not actually follow any of the standards that is necessary for a good law on restriction of freedom of expression.
And Jack, I hear what you're saying.
Jack,
I do hear what you're saying, but say it's not the only one saying what he's saying. I want you to take a look at this. This is an article I pulled up on my computer. Tighter internet laws needed to preserve the country's harmony. And this is the new communications minister. So clearly there is a good amount of people who believe that this is what's needed. Regulation is what's needed. I want to get to our community because I know that most of them disagree with that.
Yep. We have an interesting point that Awalu brought up here. He says when he heard about the regulations, he says, I support it because internet has been abused by users, but the government should not go too extreme in restricting the rights of the individuals. Jahabar, is there such a thing as just the right amount of regulation, or is the internet either just free or not free?
Well, I think the internet should be free, but I also like to take the point of what happened at the so-called protest or riot where the mob came up. I think we have to differentiate that rumors and all were passed through chatting applications, not through online portals. So why do you want to use a sledgehammer to regulate everybody when the issue was people spreading rumors using WeChat or WhatsApp and all that? So I think the internet is free. We are mature enough to regulate ourselves. We don't need the government to tell us that we can do this and we can't do that. I mean, they don't own the net. Everybody owns the net. So it just seems so illogical what they do.
I want to play you a little clip of something. This is from 2013, and it might be interesting given what we are saying now of the Prime Minister. This is the Prime Minister at Social Media Week in Malaysia. I want you all to have a listen to what he told the crowd that was gathered there.
Users. A recent study even found that Malaysia along with Brazil, has the highest Twitter use in the world. So congratulations to all social media practitioners in Malaysia. The report by the Oxford Internet Institute says that, and I quote, Malaysia stands out as a forward-looking country. That's something we can be proud of, and I hope it continues.
So Jack, you're kind of smiling there as you listen to this. Are these statements at odds with these proposed regulations, and where do we find the balance between these two things? Jack?
I certainly think that the new proposal in order to register online news sites is a very bad proposal if the intention is to build up a vibrant information and digital economy in Malaysia, which seems to be the government's interest. Because what will happen is that you will I think Jahabar can speak to this more directly, but I think what it will subject a sort of emerging and slowly maturing internet economy in Malaysia to death by bureaucracy. And this is what happened in Singapore. We're basing the model on the Singapore laws as well, where there are very, very slowly emerging successful online news sites that is creating a local market. This is ownership of local content. And they've only started to begin to create a system where it can be sustainable, where you can, create economic livelihood out of this, create jobs, and create spaces, more importantly, for ownership and discussion and opinions that is based locally. And I think that's what the government actually kind of is trying to prioritize. But at the same time, you have this law that is, a proposal of this law that is threatening to be very, very onerous, bureaucratic, has this top-down regulatory approach that says we are watching you because you can't be trusted to watch yourself. It's a little bit schizophrenic.
So we have somebody who disagrees with that. We have a video comment from somebody who actually supports regulation. Let's listen to what Aizat has to say.
There should be something to put some deterrence from spreading the malicious info, such as the maker of the statement must be prosecuted, since the defamation suit itself cannot curb the problems of spreading false information on the internet. Thus, I am not disagree with the intention to regulate the internet in Malaysia.
So earlier in that comment, he mentioned also that the Supreme Court already, the Constitution rather, already protects free speech. Jahabar, for people who say that you should just wait and see what this possible regulation would look like, is there any chance that it might just target people who are misusing the internet as opposed to people who are just expressing themselves?
I think, we have enough laws as it is. The Constitution guarantees freedom of speech to certain limits. Just putting on more laws, this seems to be such a knee-jerk reaction because, my point is simple. They think it's a monopoly set. They own the monopoly set. They're losing the debate, public debate and discourse. So they're changing the rules midway. I don't think that sounds more like the behavior of a small boy throwing tantrums.
Sayed, I'll give you the last word here because I see you wanting to jump in. Go ahead, Sayed.
Yeah. So to me, it's very simple. I don't really tweet because if you tweet when you are in anger, you may say something which can cause you to be sued. So you have to think before you tweet. That's why sometimes members of our cabinet just off the cuff goes and tweet and it gets into hot water. So that's one. Number two, if your heart is clear, you're a nice chap, you do the right things, you have nothing to fear from regulations. It's people who have intent to spew out malicious, garbage out there, because the internet is so reachable by so many people and mainstream media is completely out now. A lot of youngsters,
Sayed, I'm going to pause you there because I could see Jack wanting to explode and get in. But I'm just going to pause the conversation there. We're going to pick up and get Jack's answer in the post show. But what Sayed said was, think before you tweet. So I'll ponder that. Join us in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Welcome to the Stream's online post show. Let's get right back to our discussion about online freedom of expression in Malaysia. So we ended the main show with a quote from Syed Abdul Razak Al-Sagaf, the Deputy Speaker of the Malaysian People's Movement Party, who said, "Think before you tweet." And Jack, you look like you wanted to say something in response, so go ahead.
I think that's fantastic advice. I really think everybody should should think before they tweet and should pause before they post. I think that's a really, really good advice that should be, these sorts of things should be paid more attention to, rather than saying we need new laws. Because I think we've been saying that there's a whole range of laws already in existence. So people who say that actually, yes, the internet needs to be regulated because people are, because people cannot be trusted, they seem to forget that actually the internet is already quite heavily regulated. We have penal code, we have the infamous section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act, where included as an offense of the act is if you publish anything that could be constituted as obscene, indecent, false, menacing, or offensive, with the intent to annoy, abuse, threaten, or harass another person. I struggle to find any other legislation anywhere else that puts annoyance as one of the criteria for restricting freedom of expression.
So I want to pull up something here, Jack, that could be considered an annoyance. And this is what's at the heart of really why we're doing this show. We mentioned at the very top of the show, and that's this corruption scandal involving the government investment fund. I want you to take a look here. This is some of the stream's coverage a little bit earlier when this first broke, and people were using this hashtag 1MDB to make fun, to poke fun at the Prime Minister Najib Razak. And so you see, this is one of the memes here. He's in front of people throwing money, and you see the Wolf of Wall Street. It's just a little play on the Hollywood movie. This was tweeted with that hashtag 1MDB. Then we saw these statements about regulating, not restricting, but regulating. That's the quote there. So, Jahaber, I want to get you in here. Is this enough, do you think, to call for that regulation?
I don't think it's enough at all. I think it's, it's a man and a government that can't argue and has been so mute and silent that they've decided, hang on a minute, we don't want to listen to your questions. We don't want to entertain your queries. So we are changing the rules a bit. We find you offensive. We take offense to what you say, and we can go after you. So, it just seems too much for so little. And for a man who can't answer questions.
But could these memes at all be considered detrimental? Is there any argument for that?
I think that, sorry.
Say it, Jack, go ahead.
No, Jabba, carry on.
No, I think I just want to say that, what we've had all these years in the last few months is that a government has been very silent about this 1MDB scandal and everything that's happened. And the Prime Minister has allowed everyone else to weigh in on it without saying much, except to say, let the investigations go on, let things take its natural course, and we will get to the culprits. And then midway, he changes the Attorney General. The investigation team is broken up. We're still left without any answers. I mean, I agree, you'd need investigations to carry on. But, it just seems that it's a government that has not said a word about $700 million found in the Prime Minister's account. It can't explain why a state investment company has racked up such large debt and doesn't have cash flow to pay for its loans. And it's getting angry with people who ask questions. My sister publication was suspended 3 months. Why? Because it asked too many questions, because it cited reports that came out in other portals. There's something very wrong with that,
And I will say that the Prime Minister was effectively cleared of the allegations by the country's anti-corruption body. But of course, there's still controversy. Omar.
So the fact that, all this talk is happening immediately after that scandal is what some people are commenting on. You have Sanjeev here who says, I think the government's move is a clear sign of frustration that they can't control the narrative anymore. And you have Andrew here who says, shutting down debate essentially admits wrongdoing. Sayed, for people who see this discussion about regulating the internet coming on the back of this scandal, does this give people the sense that essentially the Prime Minister does have something to hide?
Put it this way. To me, from my party who believes being the voice of reason as well as the conscience of Barisan Nasional, we are encouraging and we are demanding that the Prime Minister, when the Parliament reopens in October, to reconstitute the PAC as soon as possible and to allow the relevant authorities like Bank Negara Malaysia as well as the task force, even though for now it has been disbanded, must be reinstituted to ensure that investigation is brought to a close, and if and unless incontrovertible evidence is produced to the guilt of my Prime Minister, then he has to face the music according to the laws of this country. But unless and otherwise, he is my Prime Minister and he can only be removed through the vote of the people in the next 14th general election, not through street demonstration or whatever. But of course, they may try to push through a vote of no confidence. That is perfectly, legitimate in a democracy, but I doubt it will work. But we are supportive of the fact that the Prime Minister has to be called to answer to these allegations by a relevant body recognized. But I also agree there has to some impediments in his place. We are asking so that these impediments are removed so that the investigation can go on.
Jack?
And I think in the meantime, you should really allow citizens to ask questions and be providing the space for as many questions to come up as possible, because these questions are here and they cannot be closed up or pretended that it doesn't
I agree.
exist.
Asking questions is all right as long as you do not say things which are not what you call substantiated. Asking questions is fine. There's no issue.
Some of these are frustrations, yeah, because no answers are forthcoming. And how do Malaysians deal with frustrations? That's the wonderful thing. We deal with it with a sense of humor. We make jokes, no? Those posters. And instead of feeling that, okay, you know, people are frustrations, taking that as a temperature of how the rakyat feels and responding to it through openness and transparency and accountability, the response is instead, now let's close it down. Let's not allow people to even make jokes. Let's not allow people to even ask questions. That's not a rational or reasonable response.
And Jack, as you were saying, how do Malaysians respond to this? They respond with humor. That is one thing it looks like all of our guests could agree on, because all of them were nodding and smiling. I'm going to give the last word here to our very vibrant Malaysian online community who, despite the time of day, are still weighing in with their opinions. Omar.
We have a tweet here from Judy, which is really the dominant sentiment I think we've seen from our online community, who says, any conversation on content restrictions online is about power. The word harmony has been manipulated in Malaysia, saying education is key to building harmony in a diverse country. Clamping down on the net would have the opposite effect.
That's all the time we have for now, but we're going to keep this conversation going with #AJStream. We'll thank all of our guests for joining us for today's conversation, and we'll see you next time.